Howdy y'all, Caleb here. We're looking at the Kroak Power Tower today. What that is you've probably seen some people complaining about Kroak. He's too powerful, he's undercosted. We're going to go in depth on that today. Is he priced too low? What does he need to bring with him to make him useful? And how much does that cost? And what kind of damage output does it do? So that's what we're going to look at today. I like to call it the Kroak Power Tower because in this optimum build, he's sitting on top of a Balewind with some support units around him and an Astrolith bear there beside him. You've kind of got this whole company of people that are helping support Kroak to make him better. So we're going to look at that and what all he does. Let's look at his War Scroll real quick. His War Scroll is, on first glance, it's good. But it's not all that impressive. It gets a lot better when we add more things to it. So he does have 7 wounds and a 4-up save. His melee weapon is pretty much terrible. It would be really good against hordes, but really you never want to get Lord Kroak into hordes. If you do, he's probably going to go down unless you have a whole lot of guard there to support him. He does have Arcane Vassal, which is pretty nice. This ability right here, it lets you channel his spells through other Skink Wizards or Oracles, which is the Skink Oracle on Troglodyte. If it's another Skink Wizard, if they're within 12 inches, you can use that model as the range for spells, which can be really nice, especially when you have a lot of Skink Star Priests on the table, which you usually will. If they're within 12, you can channel through them. If you have the Skink Oracle on Troglodyte, it's board wide, which is pretty awesome. That model's it's a little overcosted. It's 220 and it doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't have any command points. Its spell is the same as the one Lord Kroak has, and so you can make it work pretty well with Kroak if you're really just building towards that. But generally, I haven't found too much use for this ability. A lot of times when you're building Kroak as a specific feature on the table, you're going to have some Skink Wizards other places that you might utilize, but you're going to have enough range that you're not going to worry about it. The other ability he has here listed is about his melee weapons. You're gonna count up the number of models within 3 inches and make those number of attacks. It's okay if you happen to end up in a horde. Next page though on his War Scroll is really where this gets good though. He does have a 4-up ward save. And so that's pretty nice for this hero. So that makes that 7 wounds. A little bit tougher there. So he does have a 4-up. So he should survive for a little while on his own. Not forever in today's meta where there's quite a bit of shooting and a lot of output. But that 4-up ward save is pretty awesome. Impeccable Foresight. You do get to roll 3 dice for this model. And for each 4-up you receive 1 command point. So this is an extra way to generate command points. I have found this incredibly useful in a lot of my lists I take. And sometimes I'll take Kroak just for this. Now, it's statistically he's only going to do about 1 or 2, but that's enough extra command points that we have plenty of uses for him in this army. So that is good, and it makes up for Kroak's price pretty quickly. He does add 1 to his casting, Dispel and Unbind for this model, and you can unbind it board wide. So he is a wizard. He knows 4 spells, and this is where you'll see a lot of gnashing of teeth on Kroak's War Scroll here. So his first spell, Celestial Deliverance, you can cast this up to 3 times in the same hero phase. It gets harder. So the first one is 7, it goes up to an 8, and then a 9 for the casting value. So it does get a lot harder to cast. He's +1 to cast naturally, and you can add 1 from the constellations if you decide to put the constellation onto him. That's one of our faction abilities. You can add +1 to that casting as well, so now he can be up to +2. Each time that spell is successful, pick up to 3 different enemy units within 10 inches of the caster invisible to them. Roll a dice, and on a 2-up, they suffer D3 mortals. If they're Chaos Demon, they suffer 3 instead. So it's quite short range. It's 10 inches, and you pick up to 3 different units, and they can take some mortals. So you have a lot of gates you have to get through. You do have to cast it. They have to be in incredibly short range. 10 inches for a spell is very short range. and then you have to roll another dice on a 2-up. You have to get through that gate, and then D3 mortal. So there's a lot of dice rolling involved in this, and it is a dice game, but it does have multiple points of failure or where you can roll low. But this is the thing that we're gonna try to focus on making Kroak better. His other spell, Comet's Call, has a casting value of 7, and is successfully cast, you pick up to D3 different enemy units anywhere on the battlefield, and they suffer D3 mortal wounds. If it's over a 10 plus on the casting, you get to pick D6 units to take D3 mortals. And this is the thing I think that is probably more annoying to the enemy, in that it's a board-wide spell, and you're going to be doing some mortals. And it seems pretty nasty that you can do up to, D6 units can take D3 mortals. And I find it doesn't do that all the time. A lot of times I'm rolling 1 or 2 units, and they're taking, 1 or 2 mortals. But the fact that you can reach out across the board wide and kind of snipe out those support heroes really is what gives Kroak a bad name on the table. He does have a command ability which lets you add 1 to your save rolls for missile weapons that attack this unit, and so you can. That's pretty nice to add on to key units if you know that they're going to get shot, or if you want to add it on a Kroak. So we're really going to focus on his spells in this breakdown of what he does, and what we can get out of those. So he does cost 320 points, which is a pretty hefty cost for a 7 wound hero, a 7 wound wizard. On his own, I think he's priced about right on his own. I'm going to be honest. If you're taking him just by himself, I think he's priced about right. That's probably controversial. There's a lot of people that think he should be 700 points or something. I think we've heard that thrown around. But when you look at just what he does by himself, it's not a lot, to be honest. His Comet's Call, now that is board wide, but you're going to average about 4 mortal wounds on that. When he's only +1 to his spellcast, generally you're not going to roll a 10 up on that spellcast, and you're going to be looking at D3 mortals on D3 units. And so you're going to average about 4 mortals across the board. Generally, nothing's going to be within range of 10 inches unless the opponent is just been completely outplayed. And so generally you're not going to be within range of that. If you are, it's going to average about 10 mortals if you're only +1 to your cast. And so you're not going to, even if somebody's in range, you're doing 14 mortals on average, and that's good. But there's other things that'll do that too for 320 points. And that's really only going to happen if somebody's really misplayed their hand and gotten within range of Kroak. And at 320 points, he's fairly easy to kill off. He does have 7 wounds on a 4-up, but you can work through that with some rend fairly easily. One of the biggest things I like about Kroak, if I'm running him by himself, is that he does generate command points, and so you can use him to kind of make up his point cost there, and then snipe the weak heroes around the board. So a lot of times if you set him up back at the edge of the board, maybe in the Realm Shaper engine, if you're lucky enough to get on your side, back at the back of the board, out of the way, to where they're not going to really have much time to deal with him, and he can sit there and generate you command points and send out some mortals. If you really want to take advantage of the Celestial Deliverance, you've got to up that range. And that's what we're going to do with our support characters here, is we're going to add a lot more points to Lord Kroak. So we have our Lord Kroak in this build. He's 320 plus the Saurus Astrolith Bear, which adds 140. Now that Astrolith Bear, what he does is he gives you an extra 6 inch to the range of spells cast. And so you pair this up with Lord Kroak, and that 10 inches on his spammable spell now becomes 16. And that extra 6 inches there, it makes for a much bigger bubble when you're looking at the board. We're also going to take 3 units of Saurus Guard. Now you don't have to take this many, but if you're really looking to maximize Kroak's usability, I think you want some extra wounds to be passed off. Because these Saurus Guard, what they do, if Kroak takes any wounds on a 2-up, you can pass it off to the Saurus Guard. Actually, You must pass them off to the Saurus Guard. It's not a can. You must pass them off to the Saurus Guard. And so each Saurus Guard has 2 wounds, and so this does give you an extra 30 wounds, potentially, to soak off of Lord Kroak. And so in doing this, you're really making sure that he's going to stay alive long enough to be in range of things that need to take mortals. Because remember, if something's going to be in the range of Lord Kroak's spells, if they have the next turn and you don't kill them, they'll probably get into Kroak or your important pieces here. So you do need something that will help keep these things alive when somebody charges in, so that you can have at least a turn or two, or maybe a double turn to pop off as many spells as possible. We're also adding Balewind Vortex for 40 points there. And you don't really need the bound version. That would add another 10 points. Usually the unbound version, just the normal version, is fine. And what that does is that adds another 6 inches to your spell casting. It also gives you another spell cast, so he would have 5 once he's up on top of this and on the next turn. And so it also can give you +1 to your save. So it makes Kroak a little bit tougher. It makes his range bigger, and it increases the range of his spell. It gives him more spells. And so now we're looking at 800 points for this loadout here. That's that's reaching Nagash, Teclis, Archeon. That's reaching a pretty serious level of point sink into someone who's going to be doing D3 mortals. Now, you've got lots of D3 mortals to pass around everybody, but we need to get them in range. So at this price point, this is where I'm looking at Kroak and saying I need to see him doing some major utility like these other god level characters and what they can bring to the table. So let's look at what he does in reality on the table. We're going to look at some measurements, and we're going to look at deployment. And here we've got a sample table laid out. We don't have a lot of terrain here because I want to show some ranges and stuff. And this is Border War, I think, and standard map here. We're lined up 24 inches apart, which is pretty standard for a lot of battle plans. And you can see we have our Kroak here. He's on the line along with the Saurus Warriors, and we're 24 inches away from those Sequitors up there at the top. And if you're just playing with Kroak, he does not have a very big range. And we talked about that earlier, how he has about a 10-inch range. And you can kind of see that highlighted there. There's our 10-inch bubble. And that's very easy to play around. If you're the opponent, just don't charge Kroak, and you'll be out of range. You might have a few units as you're trying to get in there and capture that objective that are going to take D3 mortals. But usually you can survive that as long as you're not crowded into his 10-inch bubble. In this loadout, this 800-point loadout here, we are going to increase his range, even on deployment. So on deployment, we're looking at a 16-inch bubble because he's got the Saurus Astrolith Bear there with him as well. And so now we're projecting out a little bit further, but still, turn 1, all we're going to be averaging is those 4 mortals from his board-wide comet. We're still not doing very much damage turn 1. And if they are aware and able, they might do an alpha strike and hit you pretty hard. And so we need to be able to have an answer on turn 1 if we need one. And that's where the Balewind Vortex comes in. So on the Balewind Vortex, if we're looking at this deployment here, I need to stretch that spell range further so I can start hitting his stuff. And if you add the Balewind Vortex, that's still only going to get you to 22 inches. That adds another 6, so you're looking at 22 inches. But the Balewind Vortex has some interesting tech to it. So when you cast it, you can set it up within an inch of the wizard. So a lot of times I will line up Kroak on the line. He's got enough wounds there with the guard that if you do get alpha striked, you can usually survive that and then hit back with all your spells. But when you set up the Balewind Vortex, you'll see you can put it up, maximize as much range as you can. You've got 1 inch to play with. Just put the corner of it within 1 inch, and you set up your Balewind Vortex out. And look, you've given yourself extra range here. I mean, we've gained quite a bit of range between where he's at and where that Balewind Vortex is at. It's got a pretty big base on it, and so you're increasing your range there as well. So now he'll hop up on the Balewind, and we've increased our range now. Look at that range. Now we're up to 22 inches, but he's moved forward on that Balewind deployment. And so he has extended that range all the way up to their lines and a little bit beyond. So you should be able to hit past, the screen. Now, if they've lined up on the line, hopefully, then you'll be able to hit a couple of different units. Now, remember, you're still only hitting up to 3. So if they only have one screen, within that bubble range, which I've had that happen before, I can only reach one guy. You can still spam the spell, but you're only going to be hitting one unit. But now in this configuration, you're covering the majority of the board. The majority of the important play space here is covered by Kroak. And so if they're going to be attacking this objective and then holding some important pieces back on here, you should be able to hit most of them. Each spell only hits 3. Remember that. So it's not like you're going to blow up their entire army especially if they have a lot of different units. But you can spam that. So potentially you could hit 9 total units for D3 mortals. That's if every spell goes off and whatnot. And they don't unbind it, and you don't roll, a 1 on determine if they got damage or not. And so in that configuration, you're covering quite a bit, and you've still got enough bodies. You can kind of move your guard up to hold this objective. You've got 17 bodies on this objective now with these guard. They can take a lot of wounds, and you're free to move your other pieces up towards the other objective, while Kroak will sit here and generally be a nuisance to everybody as he's dealing mortal wounds. So there is a little bit more tech that you can do with this, though, and it gets kind of fun here. And that Balewind Vortex can be used in some interesting ways. Now, since it is an endless spell, you can dispel it yourself at the start of your hero phase. And so if you decided to do that, you then set up your wizard within 6 inches, wholly within 6 inches of the Balewind Vortex where it was. And so you can see here, my deployment is where I was normally, and I'm dispelling this the Balewind Vortex, and I'm putting Kroak within 6 inches, wholly within 6 inches of that Balewind Vortex. But you've now added some extra range to it, and you start at the start of your hero phase. When you're on that Balewind Vortex, you have 5 spells. Now you use one of those spells to dispel your Balewind Vortex, so you're down to 4. So then you cast the Balewind Vortex again, and you get that spell back, so you're still at 4. So there's some kind of tricky stuff you can do. So once you dispel that Balewind Vortex, you've moved up 6 inches. Now you can cast Balewind Vortex again. Now this is assuming, of course, that people aren't in your way, and this is all theoretical here. This is things you can do with it. So now you cast it again. You hop back on. You move all your units up. And now your Kroak is literally covering the entire playable space there, all the objectives for this game type. And so that's some tech you can use with Balewind Vortex. You can also use it, instead of popping out in front of your army here. If you wanted to, head over to the side, you can put them here. If you're fighting over this one and you got to get in range, put the Balewind there, and you're gonna extend your range out further that way. Or if you need to retreat from combat, if somebody's stuck with him, dispel your Balewind and pop your Kroak over here, and now he's out of combat. If you wanted to get him out of, some important piece that had alpha striked you or something. So don't forget about dispelling your own Balewind can be quite useful, because it gives you a 6-inch free move, and then if you recast it, you've got about 4 inches to 5 inches of extra space to play with. So you can get up to about a 9 or 10-inch move in the hero phase by dispelling and recasting your own Balewind Vortex. So We see kind of what the board looks like when we have our Kroak here, and he's going for the big range. Or if you're moving him around, you can get it even further. That is putting him at quite a bit of risk, but it is possible. So you can get him to where he's spamming his spells board wide. Now it does cost you quite a bit. This is 800 points, so it's an investment to make Kroak be able to get this range and coverage on the board. His damage does get quite a bit better. So when you're looking at the Balewind and the Astrolith Bear, and you're looking at the Constellation being added to him, Kroak is at a +3 to cast, and so you're going to be getting off a lot of these spells. Even though the one that's a 9 to cast should statistically go off. Now, you have unbinds and things like that can still come into it. You can roll poorly, and just based on statistics, you probably will fail one of these. But you have a theoretical maximum of 45 mortals. That's, rolling a 10 on Comet's Call, doing all 3 mortals on those, and then hitting every single one of these with 6s and 6s. Then, you could do up to 45 mortals. And I think that's where some of the consternation has come from, where people look at what could he do, 45 mortals every turn, and it's not really realistic. More realistic, you're going to do about 18 mortals. That's the statistical average. If you can get 3 units within range of your spammable spell plus Comet's Call, you're going to be doing about 18 mortals. Now that's a lot. 18 mortals at range can really take out quite a few important key pieces. Now it is spread out a bit because you've got to do it to different units, so you can't just pour 18 mortals from Kroak onto a Maw Crusher or something. But you can chip away at them over a turn or two. So that's kind of the statistical average that you're going to be looking at. It is a lot of points. You're looking at 80 points in this loadout. You can decrease it if you want to live dangerously. You can take out 2 units of Saurus Guard and leave them with only 10 extra wounds to be passed off. But you're living dangerously that way. He will get killed if you only have 5 Saurus Guard waiting for him. If you face something like KO or the 1-drop Stormcast Vanguard sniper stuff, they can put out an incredible amount of damage to a specific target, and Kroak can take the blunt of that if you're not careful. And so I do like taking as many guard as I can fit into the list and still maintain a board presence. I do, because I like those extra wounds on them. It makes them really tough. So, in conclusion, is Kroak correctly priced? I think he could be priced a little bit more. As on his own, I think they want to keep him under 400 points so he can be an ally. He's a great ally to take into Stormcast, which is really the only thing that can ally him, because he generates command points and he does the board-wide mortals, and he's a good wizard. But I think if you increase his points too much, he's going to quickly outpace the actual damage that he does. You've got to put a lot of pieces into him to make him really a force to be reckoned with on the table, instead of just something to ignore and avoid. I think as him by himself, he's kind of one of those pieces you just kind of ignore and avoid him. Don't get into combat, and you'll be fine. If he's built out this way at 800 points, he's going to be doing some damage to your army. So you got to figure out a way to deal with him. And he does become quite difficult to deal with those extra 30 wounds. I think you would see people probably target the Astrolith Bearer first. So he's a good target to add, if you have some command traits or artifacts that can help out there, you can add them to him. But they'll probably target the Astrolith Bearer first and then maybe work on the guard, or just put the damage into Kroak. You can get Kroak to some silly saves. If he's up on the Balewind, he's down to a 3-up. And if you spend his command point on him, if anybody's shooting him, he'd be at a 2-up because he does get a +1 to his save versus missile using his command point. So he'd have a 2-up normal save, a 2-up pass off to the Saurus Guard, who, if they're in range of the Astrolith Bear, would have a 6-up. And then any of that made it through that pass off, Kroak would then have his normal 4-up after save. So it can be quite difficult to remove him, especially when he's got this many wounds added onto him. So, all right, there's his statistical average. You're looking at about 20 mortals if you spend about 800 points on him and get him set up right on the board. You are looking to extend that range as much as possible. If they're back on the board, if they're backing up out of the way, that's fine. We've got enough pieces to score objectives, teleport something onto their objective, score their objective, and wait for them to get within range of Kroak. So, all right, what do y'all think? Is Kroak priced right? How many guard do you take? Are you taking Kroak by himself or as part of the power tower, as I like to call it? Let me know in the comments below. I think I'm supposed to say hit like, subscribe, those type of things. We'll have more videos on Seraphon strategy and things to come. So, all right, that's it for the Kroak Power Tower. See ya.